Hi, guys. Today we are going to continue talking about Roosevelt and the New Deal. So, we've been seeing the United States has been greatly struggling through this Great Depression. Roosevelt really wanted to step in and change that. Within a week, Roosevelt took office. He passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act. This new law required federal examiners to survey the nation's banks and issue Treasury Department licenses to those that were financially sound. FDR communicated this process through what are now called fireside chats. 16 million people tuned in to listen to him say, "I assure you that this is safer to keep your money in a reopened bank than under your mattress." These fireside chats was Roosevelt's way to address the nation. He would use the radio to broadcast his plans and explain them to the American people. His first show brought relief to the nation, and when the banks reopened on March 13th, the deposits far outweighed the withdrawals. This was the start to the end of the banking crisis. The Emergency Banking Relief Act gave the president power to take the dollar off the gold standard. By June, Congress passed a law that made all contracts payable only in legal tender. No one could demand gold in payment or use gold to pay for things. Roosevelt's plan worked and inflation skyrocketed. The purpose of going off the gold standard was to cause inflation. Roosevelt called it reflation because he believed that the dollar was overvalued from the decades of deflation. When money inflates, it loses its value. It then becomes easier to repay your debts because the money owed is not worth as much. At the same time, inflation causes prices to go up. Roosevelt helps the increase in prices, and it was really to help the farmers and others who were suffering from the low prices of their goods. Along with the Emergency Banking Relief Act, the Securities Act of 1933 was also passed. This Banking Act of 1933 and the Securities Act of 1933 were commonly referred as the Glass-Steagall Act. This act required all companies that sell stocks and bonds to provide complete and truthful information to investors. The SEC was also created during this time. The Security and Exchange Commission was created to regulate the stock market and to stop fraud. The other banking corporation was the FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This provided insurance to banks and increased public confidence in the banking system. The FDIC provides government insurance for bank deposits. This means that the government will provide insurance to banks in case anything would happen to them. The creation of the FDIC increased the public confidence in the banking system, and it guarantees that bank deposits after $250,000 for all members and banks is funded by insurance premiums paid by the banks and not by the taxpayers. So the FDIC was really built to help these banks come back, and the SEC was created to protect investors. The SEC's role was not to protect the investments, but to prevent fraud and to make sure investors had the truthful information so they could make the best investment decisions. Along with the FDIC and the SEC, the government also implemented mortgage and debt relief programs known as the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Farm Credit Administration. The HOLC brought mortgages of homeowners who were falling behind on their payments. They would then reconstruct the loans with longer repayment plans and lower interest rates. The FCA, or the Farm Credit Administration, was created to help farmers refinance their mortgages. Loans saved millions of farmers for foreclosures. These programs represented a dramatic expansion of the federal government's role in the economy. Congress not only helped farmers by passing the FCA, they also passed the Agricultural Adjustment Act. This act is based on a simple idea that the prices for farm goods were low because the farmers grew too much food. Under this act, the AAA would pay farmers not to raise certain livestock, grow certain crops, or produce certain dairy products. Over the next 2 years, farmers received over $1 billion in support payments. While many farmers benefited from the AAA, there was also farmers who did not get these benefits. Thousands of tenant farmers, many of them who were African American, actually lost their jobs in their homes when landlords took the fields out of production. To help the industry, Roosevelt and Congress passed the National Industrial Recovery Act. The NIRA was passed to allow the NRA, or the National Recovery Administration, to suspend antitrust laws on businesses and labor, and governments to cooperate with rules or codes of fair competition for each industry. The NRA was declared unconstitutional in 1935. Roosevelt and his advisors created these federal works programs for the unemployed. This was a decision that marked yet another change in the historical roles of the federal and state governments. Before the Depression, the government relief programs had been rare, and if one was set up, it had been funded and managed by the state and local governments. This is the first time the relief aid had been managed by the federal government. One of the most highly praised New Deal programs was the CCC, or the Civilian Conservation Corps. It was one of the most highly praised New Deals of the relief programs. It offered unemployed young men between the ages of 18 to 25 the opportunity to work under the direction of the Forestry Service, planting trees, fighting forest fires, and building reservoirs. These men lived on camps near their work areas and earned $30 a month. 25 of these dollars was sent directly to their families. The CCC also taught more than 40,000 of their recruits to read and write. By the time the CCC closed down in 1942, it had put 3 million young men to working outdoors. Other projects such as the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, known as the FERA, was also created during the New Deal. It had initially did not create projects for unemployment, but it would give money to the states and local agencies to fund their own relief projects. Roosevelt chose Harry Hopkins to run the FERA. During this time, Hopkins spent $5 million on relief projects. The PWA, or the Public Works Administration, was also created in June of 1933. This was a huge focus on the construction industry. Projects such as dams, schools, and other government facilities were created during this time so people could get back to work. Hopkins was worried about the upcoming winter. He knew that the construction would not last through this brutal weather. He turned to Roosevelt to help find a way to help these citizens, and they came up with the Civil Works Administration. The CWA employed 4 million people, including 300,000 women. The program spent nearly $1 billion within 5 months, which was a great concern to Roosevelt. He insisted that while this program was good, citizens could start to rely too heavily on the CWA, so he insisted that it should be shut down the following spring. The success of the first New Deal showed how passionate Roosevelt was. He convinced Congress to pass an astonishing rate of legislation. While the first New Deal did not restore prosperity, it brought back the hope to millions of people. Banks reopened, many more people retained their homes and farms, and even more people were employed. This was the start of bringing the United States out of the Great Depression. On Wednesday, we will start discussing the second New Deal and look at more projects and legislation Roosevelt passed to help the people. I hope you guys have a great day.